The 143rd edition of the Roy's Boys podcast starts right now.
Carolina basketball family is the strongest there's ever been. There ever will be.
Eight up freehand, King writes the ball. Pushes into Hubert Davis. 8 seconds. Davis trying to get free. Over to Fox. Fox, baseline. Up for the shot, good, off the glass. Oklahoma calls timeout, but the game is over. The game is over. Carolina has upset number 1 Oklahoma. Been ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered by Vinny.
With 20 seconds left to play, goes back to Michael Jordan. Jumper from out on the left. Good! 63, 62, 13, 12, 11. Georgetown with one timeout. Brent Brown looking. Throw away to Worthy. 35. The Tar Heels are going to win the national championship. Carolina with foul. He takes the timeout. Technical foul. Technical foul.
Brown gets it into Williams. Here comes Williams front court. Williams on the drive. Gets it back out the head. Long outside shot. Short rebound. It's over. And how about the Tar Heels? They are the national champions.
The Tar Heels are the national dadgum champions.
And that's what it takes when you big time games. You got to compete. You do it with your brain, and you got to do it with your heart too. And that's pretty doggone good.
From QCBroadcasting.com, this is the Roy's Boys podcast with your host, Josh Marlowe. Hey everybody, welcome into another edition of the Roy's Boys podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. I remember how to do the open to the podcast because, well, it's been that long since we talked. I'm joined along with my best friend as always and co-host Anthony Pagnotta. Buddy, how's it going?
I thought you had replaced me on the show. I'm going to be honest with you. I hadn't heard anything about this podcast in a while and was thinking that I may have been replaced by our guy, Mark Krings. I was hurt, but I am glad that you called me up, and apparently we just haven't really had a ton of news to be able to go off of here during this time. But, yeah, I think COVID has definitely taken a little bit of a toll on being able to get on here and have some storylines to talk about. But finally, I think we got enough to get on here and have a little chat, so I'm glad to be back.
Well, we took a month off, kind of like Carolina took the month off of February from wanting to win basketball games, but you know they're back they're back on the court. They're back practicing to some capacity. But you're right. The main reason why it's been so long is because of COVID-19 and everything going on in the world. There just simply wasn't anything to talk about, and a lot of times we exaggerate about there being nothing to do or nothing to talk about. That wasn't the case for the last 3 to 4 weeks where there was no news, no nothing. But as I said, they're back on the court, so now we got some interesting storylines to talk about. Before we get to that, though, Roy Williams celebrated his birthday this past weekend on Saturday. The head coach turned 70 years old. You couldn't tell the way he looks and acts on the sidelines, but he is 70. Happy birthday to the man that this podcast is named after, and hopefully he gets to enjoy many more years to come. But, let's go ahead and just get down to business. Carolina a few weeks ago returned to the practice court as they're in their summer portion of their offseason program. And this is as big a summer as Carolina has had since Roy Williams has returned. I'd probably put this right behind the first summer when he came back, because you're coming off a 14-19 year. And a lot of times you would think if your team isn't very good the year before, you would be better because a lot of is coming back and you got a chance to be a much better team. Carolina's known commodity coming back is Garrison Brooks, and that's it. Gone is your point guard, Cole Anthony to the NBA. Carolina will now be breaking in his 4th point guard in as many years. Brandon Robinson is gone. You lost Jeremiah Francis and Brandon Huffman to transfer. Grad transfers last year, Christian Keeling and Justin Pierce. They've graduated. They're now trying to get a professional career overseas in basketball. So there's a lot of question marks around a team that's got, a lot of expectations still in Chapel Hill.
Yeah, and I think the other big thing that really hurts this team this year is not only are you going to be dealing with a lot of youth, a lot of change within your team after a year where they kind of struggled, you also got to deal with what's going to be no matter what, even if it's to this point, we've still seen things remain somewhat normal for the basketball team in terms of being able to get back on the court, go through some few practices here over the summer. It's still going to be different. There's going to be different guidelines that are going to be in place because of COVID-19. It's going to be a different lifestyle that these guys are going to have to live on campus. I mean, we know that these guys are very popular around campus. They're guys that love to go out and socialize with their fellow students. That's going to have to change this year. And you're going to do it with a group of freshmen that, are going to be going through a lot more than just, at their first year on the basketball court. They've got to go through their first year in Chapel Hill, going through college in what's going to be an extremely different way of going about things. So there's so many different elements that, this Carolina team is going to have to work through. The thing is Roy Williams has never had to work through anything like this either. But as we've talked about many times on this podcast, and this isn't just seen as because we're doing a targeted podcast that we're the only ones that think this. Many people around college basketball would probably tell you that easily one of the top 5 coaches that they would want to help them handle a situation like this would be Roy Williams, because he's going to find ways to adjust how he goes about things. He's he's still going to stick to the way he wants things done, but he knows how to adjust, and he's one of those guys that just brings the type of leadership that you're going to need for this upcoming season. The guys that are on the court, it's going to be something to watch how this team adjusts. With all the youth that's still going to be a part of this team, really all the fresh faces, but that's going to be pretty similar to last year. I think it wasn't nearly as many true freshmen last year as it was this year, but they had the 2 grad transfers, as you mentioned, and Carolina's going to have to do something similar again this year. Now, I think you caught a break. You talk about your known commodity that comes back is Garrison Brooks. I think, you feel comfortable with the fact that you also have Armando Bacot coming back. Something that, before last season, we probably thought, okay, there's a pretty slim chance that that's going to happen. This guy is top 20 recruit, more than likely. He's going to go on and play at the NBA level, but he didn't feel comfortable with where his game was at after the first year, and so now he's coming back. And I feel like there's some things to be encouraged about with this team. There's some things to be concerned about with this team, but ultimately, I still feel like this is a group that a lot of people are going to be pretty confident in. I think they know there's going to be some extra motivation, not only for the guy that's on the sidelines and Roy Williams and the rest of his coaching staff, but also for the guys that are in place. I mean, Garrison Brooks is a guy that prides himself on being able to win games. Yeah, he had a good year last year, but Garrison doesn't look at it as, well, I played well, so I'm not really worried that the team didn't have success. So I expect this year will be a bounce-back year for Carolina, even though it's going to be one of the weirder seasons that we'll probably ever see in program history.
I think the thing I took away from your response was the leadership of the program and the players is really going to dictate how the season goes, because one way or another, it's not going to be a normal year for college basketball, to say the least. And so you're going to need leadership from your coaching staff, but you're going to need it from your players. You've got Garrison Brooks, who's the clear, he became a leader last year in a way that we never thought he would be. He became more vocal. He became more, demonstrative on the court with his frustrations and trying to get more out of players. And they're going to need him to do that this year, and maybe even more so. But, the reason why there's so many questions isn't because there's a lot of talent or there's a lack of talent. This is as talented a team as Roy Williams has probably had in the last 5 to 10 years when you add the amount of pure talent coming in with this freshman class. That's where the question comes in is how quickly do these 18 and 19-year-old kids grow up in the spotlight? Because just because you were 14 and 19 last year doesn't take the pressure off, the program, the fan base. This is Carolina. We expect to win. That expectation doesn't change after a historically down year like a year ago. And so when they returned to the court a few weeks ago, I wrote an article for the Heel Tough blog ranking the potential impact of the 6 incoming freshmen on this year's team. We're not going to go through and break down my list. I'll read it off for you guys really quickly. I think for Carolina to be successful, and successful I value a top 3 finish in the ACC, and if they have the NCAA tournament, second weekend and beyond. I think Caleb Love will be your most impactful player, followed by R.J. Davis, which might be a surprise, then Walker Kessler, Day'Ron Sharp, and Puff Johnson, then Kerwin Walton. What I want to go through with you is just really, let's talk about the impact of where it has to come from. This is the first time that Carolina will be heavily depending on freshmen to produce, since you could probably go as, far back as the Wayne Ellington, Ty Lawson, Brandon Wright class. You can make the argument for Kendall Marshall, Reggie Bullock, and Harrison Barnes, but that team also had John Henson and Tyler Zeller and Dexter Strickland that were kind of known ACC players that kind of make the transition easier. This Carolina team doesn't have that. More importantly, Caleb Love doesn't have that kind of luxury. You've got Garrison Brooks and you've got Armando Bacot, but outside of that, you don't know what you're going to get. He's the 4th point guard in as many years. He's believed to be the more natural fit to run Carolina's offense as opposed to Cole Anthony. The comparisons are going to be made to Kobe White, and you can make the argument as to why so, but you're still asking a lot of an 18-year-old kid to come in and lead a program back to the promised land.
Well, the other thing that people have to realize is that going into this year, you can't automatically assume that since Cole Anthony struggled last year, well, that means that we're going to see Caleb Love struggle in that same fashion this year. That's not necessarily true. Now, what I would say is that what it should show you is that you should temper expectations and not go in thinking, okay, this is, a system that lends well to new point guards coming in and immediately having success and being able to sustain it throughout, throughout the season. I think, when you go back and look at last year, one of the things that we probably overlooked is if we go back and look at the best point guards to play for Carolina outside of Kobe White, and that's one of the reasons why when you talk about Kobe White, you wonder if he stays 4 years, if he's not probably outside of Phil Ford, the best point guard in program history. Because remember, guys like Marcus Page, guys like Joel Berry, guys, even Kendall Marshall to a certain extent, they were nowhere near the players that they were at the end of their career in their first season at Carolina as true freshmen. I mean, they were polar opposites, especially in terms of Marcus Page and Joe Berry. They really had their struggles early on in their career and just kind of built into the players that they eventually became. That's the thing that you don't have the luxury of with guys like Cole Anthony and Caleb Love, who are ranked so high, who are pretty much looked at before the season as there's no way they're coming back because they are guaranteed to be top 10 picks. So I think the thing with Caleb Love is he's a more natural fit. So Carolina fans, you got to at least give him a chance early on in the season. Don't come out and say, well, we don't believe that he's really going to be able to live up to the hype because of what we saw with Cole Anthony last year. I think one of the other things, just from really talking through your list, I think R.J. Davis is interesting with having him that high at number 2. I think one of the things that will determine how high he'll end up being on that list will be where they feel that Anthony Harris is at rehab-wise whenever we roll around towards the start of the season. If Anthony Harris is ready to go, can start for you, then that's great. That probably means that R.J. Davis sort of falls into that category where Walker Kessler and Day'Ron Sharp are. Guys that you expect will contribute a pretty decent amount, but won't have to be superstars or even stars, really, to be able to help this team out. If Anthony Harris can't play, that's a whole different scenario. I think then R.J. Davis sort of falls into that same range that Caleb Love does. I don't think he's as important because, as we know, we are guys that believe this very heavily. the point guard is probably the most important position on the floor because you control everything, especially with this Tar Heel offense. So finding that right guy is extremely crucial. But